No spoilers ahead.
Prometheus was meant to be the movie that stuffed new life down the throat of the fading Alien franchise. It had a $130 million budget, it had big-name, reputable actors attached to it, and it was captained by the man himself, Ridley Scott, who of course brought the world the original Alien movie, which is widely considered a masterclass in science fiction and in horror. So how the hell did this guaranteed future classic end up such a muddled mess of a movie? Prometheus is a 2012 sci-fi horror movie starring Michael Fassbender, Noomi Rapace, and Charlize Theron. Fans of the series, myself included, were bursting out of their own chest cavities when Ridley Scott announced he was returning to restore the Alien franchise to its former glory. But sadly, that's not what happened. Why not come join me as I speculate all over this movie?
The plot.
The movie starts zillions of years ago when a race of giant Greek statues arrive on Earth to bless the place with a sizable chunk of their own DNA. Despite being able to isolate DNA from your organs or blood or hair or any number of other things, the Greek statues are so advanced they kill themselves to extract it. Jump forward to 2089 in Scotland of all places, and we meet archaeologists Elizabeth Shaw and her boyfriend Charlie Holloway. They've discovered a series of cave paintings that they interpret to be invitations to a galaxy far, far away. When the elderly founder of the Weyland Corporation, Peter Weyland, learns of the pair's discovery, he builds a big fancy spaceship called the Prometheus, and they all set out to see if the cave painting theory's correct. Once they arrive, Holloway and Shaw are introduced by the hologram of the now dead Peter Weyland. They explain the mission, which is to locate the Greek statues, or engineers, who they believe engineered the human race. Before, during, and after the briefing, everyone's rude and negative and totally standoffish. And why are they acting that way, you ask? Because one of the writers, John Spates, didn't know what he was doing. The ship lands next to a big pyramid-looking structure and the gang heads down to explore. And once inside, the collection of learned doctors take their helmets off, which is something you probably wouldn't even do in an unknown cave right here on Earth. And further into the structure, they find hundreds of tiny vases and a decapitated engineer. After putting their big scientific brains together, and watching an HD holographic depiction of exactly what happened, they conclude the engineers must be extinct, which really wrecks their party. For reasons best known to David, the android who should be void of such impulses, he smuggles one of the vases back into the ship, right when the cheapest of movie tactics arrives in the form of a powerful storm. And the storm arrives so quickly, it catches the captain off guard, so he's not able to warn the crew members Milburn, the biologist, and Fifield, the geologist. So they end up stuck inside the structure overnight because they got lost on their way back. That's right, the specialist who flew light years and is being paid to make maps of the entire place got lost walking back. The captain assures them the storm will be over in the morning and he'll come get them then, even though he wasn't able to see the storm coming in the first place. And as Shaw insists on taking the engineer's head back into the ship, they barely make it to safety. And once they're inside, they stick the head into a container and figure out its DNA is a direct match to our own. And this gets them so excited, they run electricity through the head to trick it into thinking it is still alive. You know, the way a pair of unsupervised 6-year-olds might do with a frog. And it works. And then the head explodes. Elsewhere, sneaky David finds ampules full of black goo inside the vase, so he decides to act like a human again when he goes to comfort poor Dr. Holloway, who's sulking all by himself because he discovered the origins of humanity. I suppose I'd be in a shit mood too if I was flown halfway across the galaxy, all expenses paid, in hopes of making a giant scientific discovery, and all I did was meet our creators. I mean, that doesn't even justify the cost of my student loans. David slips a drip of goo into Holloway's drink, conveniently, just moments before Holloway and Shaw have intercourse. You might be asking what that gloopy substance is or why David decided to put it into Holloway's drink. And as your humble narrator, I am here to advise you to stop asking so many sensible questions or you're going to end up angry and confused. Not long after the act, Holloway looks in the mirror and sees a small black snake thing coming out of his eye. So being a scientist, he does nothing at all about it. And if I'd found a small black worm thing in my eye right after I was with Noomi Rapace, I'd be all like,
Dr. Shaw? Yes, Holloway, darling. What are you doing? Why, naturally, I'm sulking about how cold this space corridor is. Can't you tell from looking, darling? I could barely get half my space makeup on before the shivers took me. But the space thermostat says it's the perfect temperature. Why do you think it's cold? Because it's what I choose to believe, darling. And you've known me long enough to know that I could care less about such things as facts. Listen, quick question. Remember down in the pyramid place and we saw that snake thing in the black goo? I certainly do, darling. And remember when all the other scientist guys called it a space dildo and everybody bust out laughing, but you didn't bust out laughing? Yes. Then you kind of disappeared for a while? Yes. Oh, absolutely, yes. Well, I've just been staring at myself in the mirror for a long time, and I've realized I have a small version of that thing in my eye. That's disgusting, darling. And you and I did have sex right before I noticed it. What exactly are you saying, darling? I'm saying you did something inappropriate with that space dildo snake thing. That is preposterous. Well, that is what I'm choosing to believe. I suppose, yes, I suppose.
Speaking of moronic, the geologist and biologist happen upon an amphibious snake thing, and being a qualified expert in plants and animals and the ecosystems they live in, Milburn decides to pet it, so it breaks his arm and burrows deep into his throat in a matter of seconds.
But you can't blame him. Think about it. If you came across something similar here on Earth, like, say, a cobra, of course you would kneel down and stroke it. How else are you supposed to obtain valuable scientific information from it?
And then Tweedledum gets covered in the creature's acidic blood, so now both of them are proper fucked. Experts indeed. The next morning, the crew goes back in to find Milburn's stupid corpse, while Sneaky David finds a big room in the back with a hibernating engineer in it. While he's there, the HD holograph system the engineers installed thousands of years ago to fill in plot holes in movies shows David how to work the navigational system. Meanwhile, Holloway's eye infection goes full-blown, so he's rushed back to the ship where Charlize Theron sets him on fire. And when Shaw's done crying, David tells her she's pregnant, despite being incapable of such a thing. After a bit of kicking and screaming, she escapes to a surgery pod and has the squirming, tentacled bundle of joy ripped from her tummy.
And in two totally interesting, shocking revelations that are neither interesting nor shocking or relevant to the plot, we learn that Wayland is still alive and he's on the ship. And Charlize Theron is his daughter.
Wayland wants his life extended, so he and the remaining crew go wake up the surviving engineer to ask him for it, as if he's some kind of big pasty genie. David used the ship's computer to learn the engineer's language, so he asks the engineer to make Wayland a brand new boy again. So the big Greek statue rips David's head off and beats Wayland to death with it.
And the lesson here, obviously, there are risks associated with learning new languages from free apps.
Shaw escapes back to the ship. When the engineer's done kicking everyone's head in, he starts his own ship up to leave the planet. But Charlize Theron tries getting Idris Elba to take them home. But Shaw makes it clear there won't be a home to go back to if they let the engineer escape. So Charlize Theron retreats to an escape pod and the Prometheus is slammed directly into the engineer's ship, which crashes to the ground, squishing Charlize Theron, who was never taught the many benefits of zigzag running during a crisis. Shaw heads for an escape pod, but she's blocked by her massive needy child, who's developed abandonment issues already. Not surprisingly, Greek statue boy survived the crash and he's come to attack Shaw, who suddenly finds value in her gigantic, previously discarded baby.
No wonder it has a complex.
The baby climbs on top of the engineer and gives us the best CGI scene in the film when it places its own offspring deep down inside the engineer's tummy. Totally defeated, Shaw cries. But then David gets in touch, because it turns out his Bluetooth dongle's located up his nose and it's still working. He tells her there's loads of ships on the planet and he can fly them with his teeth, I suppose. So instead of questioning why the superior being chose to come after her instead of just heading for another ship, Shaw and David's head take off together. Not for home, mind you, but for the engineer's home planet, because Shaw needs to find out why they hate her so much. And in most scenarios, this would be the moment when David, the logical android, would point out the likelihood of the engineers murdering her immediately. But David's current state has him on par with a digital radio one might keep in their kitchen, so he doesn't have the strength to argue against the Hollywood actor's need to be liked by literally everyone.
And there you have it, the plot of Prometheus. Let's take a look at why so many Alien fans needed space from the movie. Or why they found it wasn't at the center of their universe. Or why it didn't have much of an atmosphere. Forget it. Roll it.
The good bits.
This movie's aesthetically stunning, from the opening Icelandic waterfall shots to the claustrophobic closing depiction of the Deacon creature's creation. Prometheus nails the set pieces and the costumes and the sound effects and the visual effects to the extent you believe you're in alien territory from start to finish.
And with over 1,300 digital effects shots, I couldn't find a single flaw. And trust me, I look for them.
Prometheus is also ambitious and Amazonian jungle dense with theme exploration and symbolism. Within its obvious 2001 A Space Odyssey framework, it explores human origins and our significance within the universe, and the life and death cycle, the parent-child relationship, and loss and grieving, and the nature of the soul, and even the life of Thomas Edward Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia, who the movie suggests David likens himself to as an outsider who struggles with his own identity. These themes are woven into the movie's complex tapestry for you to observe and mull over beyond the film's runtime.
None of these are small themes, and none of them have small answers. In fact, some of them don't have answers at all. Which brings us nicely to
The shite bits.
All good movies are filled with conflict because conflict creates tension, and tension makes movies enjoyable. In most movies, conflict occurs naturally when the writers put challenging obstacles in front of the characters, or they have desires that compete with other characters. The manipulation of these tensions dictates the movie's pace, and its execution can make or break a movie.
Unfortunately, Prometheus writers appear to have confused proper conflict with people just being assholes to each other with no proper motivation to do so.
The first third of the movie is one big argument. Vickers is condescending towards everybody. Fifield rejects the politest introduction imaginable from Milburn. During the mission briefing, instead of being astounded by the possibility of potentially meeting their creators, every single member of staff who's being paid to be there to do a job sits around moping and complaining and arguing with the two people their employer just designated their bosses. And every time Holloway interacts with David, he speaks to him like he hates him, despite David being nothing more than an expensive laptop on legs. Once they're inside the pyramid, Holloway asks Fifield to map a grid of the entire structure, which is his job and his passion. And Fifield replies,
"If there's anything in here worth looking at."
He's a scientist, more specifically, a geologist who loves rocks. He's light years from Earth on a planet he's never seen before. If there's anything worth looking at?
As well as getting the conflict wrong, Prometheus also has its characters do things your average grade schooler wouldn't risk doing on a school trip. Why did Holloway take off his helmet? And when he did take off his helmet, everyone else called him an idiot. So why did they all do it too? And why did the biologist reach out to pet a wild alien creature? Why did the cave paintings direct everyone to a military installment? And why did Shaw tell Jackson, the security guy, to leave his weapon behind when they were heading onto an alien planet they knew nothing about? It's literally alien to them. When Fifield reappears at the ship's door folded up like an alien pretzel, why did the nameless crew guy walk over and kick him? And why didn't Charlize Theron just run off to the side?
You can always write one or two of these things off, but when they're everywhere, they start standing out more than the special effects and the acting and the set pieces, and that's a bad place to be. But what's worse
I talked about how ambitious Prometheus was, but ambition can be a double-edged sword, and that's absolutely the case here. In tackling all these grandiose concepts, they've bitten off way more than they can chew. Any of these themes explored individually would have been great, but mixing them all together makes the story muddled and convoluted.
I've said it a number of times before on this channel, great movies are supposed to pose questions and cause reflection. But by focusing on so many lofty concepts at the same time, Prometheus leaves you asking questions about all the wrong things.
Who cares about the meaning of life if you don't know who the engineers actually were, or where they're from, or what their purpose was, or why they suddenly started hating human beings? The original Alien was successful because the premise was simple. It's a haunted house story in space. And if a premise that simple earned Ridley Scott one of the best horror sci-fis ever created, why did he do the opposite this time around?
The verdict.
So, should you watch Prometheus if you haven't seen it already?
On the strength of its visuals alone, yeah, you should see it. But in terms of overall story, be prepared to be let down. Prometheus pretends it's something epic, but it's not. It's vacuous and it's unoriginal, and frankly at times it's insulting to your intelligence. Until next time, folks. It's me, Johnny, from that thing you just watched. If you enjoyed it, go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe. And if you want to watch another thing, there's one right there. Do it!